Carl and Liam here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short, and it's We're Afraid of the Dark. Our Are You Afraid of the Dark talk through and review. We are up to episode 9 of season 4, The Tale of the Ghastly Grinner, written and directed by Ron Oliver. So that's always a very good sign.
It is indeed.
And I think it should be said at the start, I think this is one of the most entertaining episodes to date across all 4 seasons. Entertaining is the important word. I'm not going to tell you it's great. I'm not going to say it all makes sense. I'm not going to overanalyze it. I'm saying from an entertaining perspective of what everybody was clearly going for, e.g. a comic book fucking episode, they nailed it.
Absolutely. I think what I want from these episodes is primarily to be entertained, and I think it achieves a hell of a lot in its short runtime. We always talk about episodes not achieving enough or not being able to fit what they want to achieve into these runtimes, and this is just a perfect example of doing that in such a short amount of time. And also, I think it's a great name for the title. I love the name.
Yes, it is. It is. It immediately sets your mind aflame. Doesn't tell you what it is, but tells you something ghastly. And our cast is Amos Crawley as Ethan Wood, Heidi Burbala as Hooper Piccolario, who might be one of the funniest fucking characters they've ever had. Neil Krotchix as the Ghastly Grinner, Missy Christiansen as Frankie Uncas, Penny Mancusa as Marsha Wood, Bob Brewster as John Wood, Terence LeBross as Mr. Wrightson, and Danny Raboy as Sylvester Uncast. There are so many facts. Basically, Ron Oliver went mental on this one, as did DJ McHale, and decided to jam as many references. It's like a fucking collection of references. We start with when Ethan Woods lifts up the comic book with a hole burned in it. You can see an advertisement not only for Are You Afraid of the Dark on that comic book, but also another Nickelodeon show, The Ren and Stimpy Show. The former is actually an advertisement for a specific thing, the VHS Nightmare Tales, which were on sale, which is very, very cool.
Mm.
In the comic book shop, a cardboard cutout of the Crimson Clown is there with its gleaming gold eyes, so keep an eye out for that. But also elsewhere you'll see posters: the Crimson Clown, the Watcher from the Tale of the Watcher's Woods, a transformed Keith from the Tale of the Dark Dragon. That is a very, very niche one, I thought.
Mm.
Elsewhere, Amos Crawley appeared in Goosebumps Haunted Mask episodes, both of them, as Chuck. I didn't recognize him, I'm afraid.
I did feel like I recognized him from something, but now you say that, I actually do. I do see it now.
According to Ron Oliver, this episode was inspired by him being gifted some Tales from the Crypt comic books and wondering what would happen if comics came to life. And you're like, now watch the episode, it makes complete sense. Tales from the Crypt, and if you know what I mean, you go back and watch something like what's it called? Creep Show, the film Creep Show, and how that brought a comic book to life. The similarities are here.
Yeah, I mean that explains everything.
Um, Hooper is based on a girl Ron Oliver knew as a kid. That is hilarious.
That is actually hilarious.
Composer Ned Fisher states this is one of his favorites to do, and you'll notice the music in this. And
Oh yeah.
he said he was trying to out-cheese Danny Elfman.
Oh wow. But yeah, I mean, the music deserves a special mention. It is
It does
definitely
indeed. We don't normally
yeah.
talk about music in this show, and that's how
Mhm.
relevant it is here.
Mhm.
Ron Oliver stated he based a lot of the framing in his direction of comic books. Can you believe it? Neil Krotech, who portrayed the Grinner, was so worried that Amos Crawley was going to get scared. But happily, Amos Crawley's mother was on set and was able to reassure him it would be okay.
Oh, little hug here and there after the terrifying scenes.
Indeed, as well, he also filmed all his scenes in just one day, which resulted in him forgetting about the show. In fact, it
Oh,
wasn't until a fan reached out to him for an autograph a few years ago that reminded him
yeah.
that he was even in this show, which led him to binge watch all the episodes again and become a big fan.
Oh,
That's a great story.
that's a great story. Love that.
Yeah, there's a shit ton of facts about this episode, people. This appears to be a big notable one, which is weird because I hadn't heard of it. The big notable ones, I tend to, if I've not seen them, I might be like, oh yeah, people talk about this one. But I hadn't seen that. I don't know if you're more familiar with them.
Yeah, I mean that's odd to me as well because like it didn't jump out to me like straight away as being one that I like think of. I don't know why, but now I definitely will think of it more like when I think about the best episodes of this show. But for some reason, yeah, it took me by surprise because I feel like we've had a few episodes before this one, like obviously haven't been too great, been mostly disappointing. So you just get to that point sometimes in these episodes where you have that a run of like 4 episodes, one will come along and you're just not expecting anything from it, and then it takes you by more surprise and you enjoy it even more than you thought you would, just because you were on like a bad run type thing.
I think I'm going to tell people it speaks volumes that I didn't. I started my notes on this, was writing away for about 5 minutes, and then just went, "Okay, I'm going to watch this episode." So I
Mm.
stopped writing my notes. I watched the episode properly, then I rewatched it doing my notes, because I was so doing my notes. I was like, "This is fucking fun," and I'm too distracted. Let me watch it once and then do my notes afterwards. That's how interested I was in it.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. Campsite, and Gary is having some trouble lighting the campfire as the logs are wet. Kiki tries to get the fire going the old-fashioned way by rubbing two sticks together, but needs more paper. You might be thinking, this is a weird cold open. What's this got to do with anything? Hold on, because Frank grabs some paper from Tucker's back pocket. It's a comic book and wants to use that as kindling, which of course Tucker's not okay about. As they bicker, Betty Ann arrives, and I've noticed something about Betty Ann's character that's become a bit more prevalent as she got older. She's a bit more stern, a little bit more telling people off, a little bit more
Mm.
mother-like figure of the campsite because she takes the comic book, tells them to be quiet, everybody sits down, and she takes the storyteller chair. And I'm like, Betty Ann's Gary, best watch out. I think Betty Ann's making a play.
Yeah, we're gonna have a tug of war, some kind of situation where they're gonna have to face off for leadership mutiny. I reckon they'll think about it and they'll be like, well, let's weigh up your stories, Gary's and Betty Ann's, and once the scales clearly tip in her favor, I think Gary might be in trouble.
Well, Gary's on 7, and thanks to Betty Ann being a storyteller here, this puts Betty Ann now on 10.
Also, what is interesting that she's telling another one so soon after the previous one. It makes me wonder, like, how does that occur? Is it just who has a story ready, or how do they select who's the storyteller?
I often wonder if I've wondered that about it as well. I like to believe it's literally like names go into the hat, and that's why it could
Mm.
be some of those people in a row.
This makes you wonder, like, behind the scenes, was there any like, people
Mm.
actors getting a bit annoyed, like, oh, she's already done quite a few, and it's probably my turn to to be like have center stage. Definitely, I reckon that actually played Gary would have had that issue.
Yeah. Because you don't have a lot of dialogue as the Midnight Society, but when you're telling a story, you get a bit more.
Also, it does make you wonder, like, if we think maybe some of Gary's stories were not too great, maybe the actor who played him, he's kind of like, they're feeding me shit here. Come on.
Oh, right,
To
we're
his like
creating this
age,
entire world.
I can imagine to his agent in his trailer, he's got like his own trailer and everything. Like,
Yeah,
they keep giving me
screaming at him.
give me all the magic stories with Sardo in it. Like, do something here. Get me a Betty Ann story.
Oh, that's great. Right, but yeah, what if comic books were made up? What if they were like guidebooks to another dimension? It's at this stage that the campfire now bursts into life. Betty Ann says that the comic books take people into a world of fantasy and adventure, but is it a place that comes from someone's imagination or from someone's experience? Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, this is the tale of the Ghastly Grinner. The story is about a teenager named Ethan Woods. Ethan is a young but very talented artist, and he dreams of becoming a big comic book artist, but suffers rejection after rejection, enough so that he starts to lose faith in his abilities. That is until he discovers an invitation amongst the rejected letters, and he finds that he's been asked to come to a grand opening of a new comic book shop called Comic Books Inc. First off, love that title because it's Comic Books Inc.
Mm.
INK, which is
Yeah,
very clever.
yeah, very clever.
But also, this opening sets the scene. There's a level of fantasticness about even how he pictures things in his mind, and he's flicking the paper around. It already feels quite fantastical.
Yeah, there's immediately like a zany feel to the episode, just the way it's shot and like with the musical score, just adds to the atmosphere. It's really like immediately grabs your attention.
And this is a weird thing for me to praise because ultimately it doesn't apply to the actor. But weirdly, I think the look of our character, our main character Ethan, is particularly important. He has long hair, kind of scraggly. He's got an interesting face that kind of makes him stand out from the norm. He looks and came across to me where I was like, you could be an older, tortured artist style person, you know?
Definitely. I mean, he has the look of like a believable outcast type child that you could imagine would be probably that kind of character in real life. Yeah.
There it is. The next day, that is where he goes, though, to comic book store, finding a place empty and meeting Frankie Uncas, a hip young woman and the owner of the store. She takes a liking to him, nicknaming him Cakes and offering him some obscure comics such as Dust Boy and Fish Man. He shows her his invitation, and she is shocked and surprised to find out he's the one she invited to come to the grand opening. Love these two together. They've got really weird chemistry together. She's great. But like they've got weird chemistry together. It's really unsurprising because she's like she's an older person.
Yeah, I mean that is another real like positive this episode is a many like all the characters just work so well off of each other. Yeah.
Yeah. She tells him the reason why she invited him, it's because word travels around and she's heard that he's a pretty good artist. Looking at his drawings, she's impressed and bigs him up, suggesting that he draws like one of the greats. And she mentions that one of the greats was a comic book artist named Sylvester Uncas, but Ethan is clueless about the man though. She then asks him if he's ever heard of the Ghastly Grinner and reveals a special comic book, a one of a kind. The comic book is kind of basically to describe the Ghastly Grinner, think a court jester. But a court jester mixed with the Joker, I think, to a degree.
Yeah, definitely.
One said to be so evil and powerful that just hearing him simply laugh makes his victims basically turn into like laughing zombies, so to speak.
Yeah.
The comic is issue 1, volume 1, created by Sylvester Uncas. Uncas was a genius comic book creator, but his creation was so frightening he drew just one issue and then he disappeared. And Frankie offers him the only copy left, which Ethan is more than happy to take. So obviously now I'm suspicious of Frankie because you're not going to give that shit away. But I do like the mystery of like it's a classic story of an author, someone that wrote or created something that was so terrifying and then they vanished. I watched a horror movie a couple of, like last year that was about a painting, a depiction of hell that was so terrifying they disappeared afterwards. It creates that like all mystery around it, you know?
Yeah, and I just something about certain setups in like horror stories that I love. I just love this setup here of the comic book store and being given like this one of a kind issue and this whole mystery about the author and stuff. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It lets you create imagery before you see anything.
Yeah.
The next day, Ethan is at school, sneakily reading the comic in class until his teacher clocks him and takes it. And Ethan has to watch in dismay as the teacher, Mr. Wrightson, drops it in the fish tank, which is a dick move, teacher. But also probably illegal because you can't
Mm.
destroy someone's property.
Was the 90s. Teachers could get away with a lot more.
Indeed. And we even see the class nerd, Hooper Piccolario, seems to think that is a bit much. This is where we first are introduced to her, but she hasn't spoken yet, which is where she really gets funny. After school, Ethan comes home to find his parents sitting together on a sofa. And if you weren't clear on the zany slapstick nature of this, holy fuck, I thought this was a dream sequence. That's how mad it was. And then it's not. And I'm like, that might be brilliant. Basically, to sum it up, the camera films them in a way where they're made to look really gross and obnoxious. They're eating junk food, watching television. They had a call from the school, so they're telling them off. But it's all about hypocrisy. They're like, all right, if you continue to behave bad at school, we're going to take your comic books away because they're an addiction. It's not good for you. While obviously sitting in front of the TV, eating junk food. It's basically the hypocrisy of parents. But it's filmed and how they look and the makeup and done in such a wacky way that it's incredibly entertaining. And the actors are buying into it. Like they are
Mm.
believing it and they were told, be weird. And they're like, all right then.
Yeah, I mean they hired the right actors for the job clearly, but also it reminded me a little bit of the movie Matilda with Danny DeVito and Mara Wilson, how the parents are in that. Obviously, it's about her wanting to read books and he wants to read comic books. It's a little bit like that. But also, I was going to say it's actually incredibly rare in these episodes in Goosebumps that are Redux, but there to be two parents, like two parental figures, not like a single parent. So that immediately was like, oh bloody hell, they've thrown like a trope, a convention out of the window straight away. Something different here, so it made it even feel more fresh for that reason.
And they're not even like dressed up as terrible parents either because they openly acknowledge the call and they're going to punish him if he doesn't continue to behave. So it's not even
Yeah.
like they're immediately bad parents. There's a
Mhm.
thing at the end which suggests that it might be not great, but like it is different. It is unusual. And that's why I said I thought it was a dream sequence and I was going to be like, we're going to come out of it and he's an orphan in an orphanage, you know? In the kitchen, Ethan, who apparently is stupid now, decides to try and dry a comic book in the microwave. He's old enough to know better. No excuse for
Yeah,
this.
that's true.
So as I say, dumb idea at the best time, but he's distracted by a call from a girl, and I thought this was fucking hilarious.
So good.
It begins with basically, his mum calling him. He's got a call. He doesn't want to know, and then his mum's like, "It's a girl," and his an attitude changes completely. Brilliant teenage boy antics. But then this is the first time Hooper speaks, and Hooper likes to repeat a certain set of lines about who she is and where she sits. And the deadpan way she repeats is she's fucking hilarious. I thought this was just brilliant.
Oh, it was fantastic. Yeah, like you said, the way he's not interested, then finds out as a girl, he puts on like a smooth sort of voice, sits back, and he's like, "Hello," and like then when it's her and just her delivery, she's so dry, it's just brilliant.
And cleverly they went right. She's a nerdy character, so let's not fuck around. Glasses, braces, pigtails, braided pigtails. You can't get any nerdier, and it's just the most comic book nerd version ever.
Absolutely, it's great stuff.
But she's nice to him and says, "Look, I was calling you because I thought the teacher was too harsh, and I actually think you're a good artist." But downstairs, we had previously seen that the parents had a very dangerous looking plug setup system. The overloaded outlet is hilarious.
Yeah,
There's like 20 things plugged into one.
I love that.
And the mum's starting to cook pizza waffles, and that dodgy outlet overloads, which causes the microwave to kind of blow up. But we see the door sort of open in a yellow flash as well, suggesting something sinister had happened. This is a blink and you'll miss it moment, which I actually really like because that means like they don't delay it, they don't hold on it, they don't make it obvious. It's like something happened, but what happened, who knows?
Mm.
Ethan rushes downstairs, and aside from some smoke, everyone seems to be okay. I really like the fact that the parents don't really seem to care about what just happened.
Yeah, yeah. They're just so like engrossed in whatever they're doing. They don't like outside of the bubble of where they are, kind of thing.
The comic book is wrecked though, except it's weirdly wrecked. It's got a big hole punched through the middle, but alongside that, there's a hole in the wall opposite that is brilliantly shaped like a jester, including with the hat as well. So something basically you can work out something came out of the comic book at speed, out of the microwave, and went straight through the wall. Particularly when Ethan walks closer to it, you hear background laughter, and around the cutout there's kind of like a blue slide. I love this. This is fantastic. Also, great effects, great set design. Everybody is putting a lot of effort into this.
Yeah, I mean, I put on my notes that I thought whoever was involved in this whole scene and even what's to come next deserves a raise because I think the whole thing is just executed to perfection.
Yes, indeed, because his mom now comes in, and basically, she's a victim of the ghastly grinner, laughing uncontrollably as blue slime drips out of her mouth. Naturally, Ethan is terrified, screams, goes over to ask his dad for help, who's still sitting in his chair, but it's also too late for him. Right. Holy shit. First off, the effects are fantastic. This is
Hmm.
genuinely scary looking stuff, but the way the blue slime is like it's a replacement for blood, obviously, but to utilize that and make it work, it doesn't just pour out of the mouth. At first, it's they talk and it starts to dribble out like it's uncontrollable. And amongst that, they're laughing like lunatics with mad eyes. Everyone looks great, but then you have the filming style. It does it in obnoxious up close and low cameras, so you get like a full face leaning down. And you use Matilda as a great reference earlier on. Think the Trunchbull and how she's filmed in it to look bigger and scarier and stuff like that. Lord of the Rings utilized a lot of that, where bigger characters lean in and stuff like that. This does a great job of that. I thought this was fabulous. I really, really, I couldn't, but I'm so impressed.
Yeah, I think this is probably up there as one of the strongest scenes in like this entire show's
Yeah.
run, I would say. It's so good.
And remember, folks, as well, this has happened to your parents. You put yourself in Ethan's shoes. You have no idea what's happening, and this is terrifying.
Yeah, and you also look from the perspective of the fact that he's used to them not paying much attention to him. So you can imagine how much more freaky it is now. They're paying so much attention to him in the state that they are. That must be more scary.
So he runs outside and tries to hide, and there he looks in the comic book and sees that it kind of reflects what is going on around him now. He starts from behind, it's Hooper. She came over having heard the explosion on the phone, which actually was a joke earlier on when she actually said across the line, "Did your house just blow up?" when he first happened. She came over to see if he's okay. This is where, again, like I said, the comedy of her deadpan delivery of who she is and where she sits is hilarious. But he kind of tries to tell her, look, I'm not sure how, but I think I brought a comic book character to life. He shows her the burnt comic and explains to her what's been going on. Obviously, she's kind of just not too sure about this, but then we see her parents arriving at Ethan's house, and we see the basically the parents being invited in. And like she's Hooper's like, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. It's weird that my parents are here, but there's nothing wrong with that. But he points out that his parents had invited them in to meet Uncle Bob. And he just goes, I don't have an Uncle Bob. And I thought that was actually, the delivery of that is actually really frightening. The way he just says it, I don't have an Uncle Bob. You're like, and then you hear the laughter in the background. You're like, oh,
Mm.
that's horrible.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, unsure what they're doing, they decide to head back to the comic book store. And I think this might be the scariest scene in the episode, as they board a bus, trying to make sense of the comic book that appears to be telling a story. And then, suddenly, the bus driver's head twists around completely backwards. Great effect. He's another victim of the Ghastly Grinner, as blue ooze slime pours out of his mouth and he laughs uncontrollably, and then takes them on a wild bus ride until Ethan is able to pull the emergency brake. Stop the bus suddenly, which knocks the driver out, allowing them to escape. Brilliant. First off, I am of an age, or of a, not even an age, because you don't necessarily have to be of an age for this, but of a time and life choices or film choices where every time I see anybody get in a school bus that goes out of control, I think of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. That's it.
Mm.
This was my
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger moment and stuff like that. So immediately that immediately puts me on edge because that was always a scary scene for me when I saw that film younger. But the way this is done again and the acting of the driver and the spinning around really fast, like this has again, like it reminded me a little bit of It with Pennywise, the over-the-top antics. It is just a very scary set of scenes.
Yeah, I mean it's just really surprising that they put all this into this one episode because it's just like where has this stuff been, man? It's just like this is what you're this is what they're it's one of those things where it's like it's so good it almost frustrates you because of some of the other episodes. It's like you can see what they're capable of doing. You know, they're not holding back here. It doesn't feel like there's any like restraints. They're not, they're going for it full ham, and that's why it's so good.
I think a lot of it really does come back to the most basic thing, which is who's writing your story, who's directing your episodes, and the simple fact is Ron Oliver is a name where it's synonymous with these '90s shows, whether it be Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps. All right, he doesn't knock it all out of the park every time, but when he does, it often he is the name associated with the good stuff.
Yeah, like I mean, I've said before, like with the storytellers, they're supposed to remember there's meant to be telling stories that are supposed to, they're supposed to push the limit as far as they can with being scary for, teenagers or young adults. And this got the memo, that this really understood that assignment.
Absolutely, but we are far from done because at the comic book shop, it was revealed that Sylvester Uncas wasn't just a good artist, he was also creating guidebooks to other worlds so people could protect themselves. However, everyone thought he was crazy, so they didn't believe him until he decided to create the Ghastly Grinner. But it turns out he mistakenly created something so evil that he immediately needed to put a stop to it. Therefore, he tried to quickly wrap it up and end the comic book series by making the final issue the death of the Ghastly Grinner. However, before he could finish the comic book, the Grinner found out and captured him, and he's not been seen ever since. And she now reveals that she knows all of this because Sylvester Uncas was her father. Brilliant set of reveals, storytelling here. It's all stuff you suspected, but here we get it just spelled out, but also setting up the idea, which I think would be so great to explore. If it was a different show, we might. The idea that Sylvester Uncas had the power to create doorways to other worlds, but then realized a lot of them were evil and was then creating comic books as guidebooks to deal with the monsters that existed within them. That's a
Mm,
cool idea.
it's great stuff.
Anyway, this is why she invited Ethan to the store, as she believes he can finish the comic book. Hooper suggests, look, a microwave created it, or freed it, should we say. Maybe we can use microwaves to destroy it. A giant microwave emitting rays from it. It's a good idea, but how are they going to get that kind of thing? Well, good thing earlier on at school in the science class, there was stuff about microwaves and emitting rays and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was like really a nice throwback to that because like it's probably like you're supposed to be in a position where you're also not kind of paying attention to what the teacher's saying, but she is, so it's like it actually was giving you important information if you're paying attention. Yeah.
And find me anything that doesn't introduce something at the start that is used later on. It's a point to it. It's a storytelling trope, but it's a necessary one, particularly in a show like this.
Yeah, but I think it's cleverly done, especially in a classroom environment, especially when younger people are watching at the time where they normally would switch off, maybe not pay much attention. But there are
Agree?
certain people that do pay attention to the important details, like Hooper. And then, yeah,
Yeah, and by having her say it, you're absolutely right. We would have criticized this more heavily. Sorry, we would have criticized this heavily had they just been like, "Oh yeah, remember that big microwave in science class?" And we hadn't
yeah.
seen it. That would have been worse.
Also, it's been a relevant point up to now with the creation of it in the microwave and everything. So it's well done, I thought.
And not only that as well, right? That is so nonsensical because you're like, "Well, how? Why? What?" It's so nonsensical. It's comic book logic.
Very comic booky, definitely.
But suddenly the Grinner appears, making Frankie vanish and forcing Ethan and Hooper to run for their lives. Love the look of the Grinner. I really, really do. It is, and the actor is basically channeling a bit of the sort of animated Joker to like that aspect with a bit of clown gesturing as well. He's a bit hoo-hooing. It's like a mix of who played the Joker in the Adam, the early Batman series. You know who I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Who does a lot
yeah.
of "Woo-hoo-hoo" and stuff like that. There's a lot of
Mhm.
that, but a little bit more sinister. I think he's very good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of these episodes they have these characters and stuff and it builds up to the big reveals and it has to deliver and I thought it was just so well done and it's another stellar scene, the whole comic book scene and we finally get the big reveal and I thought it didn't disappoint at all. The makeup and costume effects are to a very surprisingly high level, so it's really great stuff.
Agreed. And that forces our hero and heroine to run to the nearby school, specifically the science class. Um, but unfortunately, before they can use the microwave, the teacher is here to stop them. And we actually see firsthand, we now get, I didn't expect this, how, well, the Ghastly Grinner attack and transform the teacher. And I think this is where they push the line of what's acceptable in a show at this for this certain age group. Weird
Mhm.
for me to say that, but not only is I think it's terrifying, I think it's violent, and I think it's very, very close to like the line.
Definitely must have been like that when they showed this, like, I don't know, the people that have to decide whether they can put it out there. I'm surprised, honestly, they weren't cutting a few of these little things. Like, I wonder if there was things that they did that maybe they couldn't put in there, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like just little snips and trims the scene up a bit, like to make sure that we didn't go too far with it.
But then again, like this, what happens here? Like, I don't know how that made the cut, honestly.
Yeah, because they turn on the microwave machine, but nothing happens. And then the Grinner grabs Ethan and holds him up in the air. And again, you're like, wait, what are we even doing here? Like, it is, I said, they're really pushing it here. And like, you might think we're overreacting here, but it's fascinating because we are so many episodes in. We're 40, nearly 50 episodes into this fucking show. And it kind of follows a formula regarding what age it's aimed at, what it will push, and how what it'll try and get away with. A lot of the time, it doesn't push the limits. Not even Goosebumps would later push it much further. But this episode is when so the fact it's doing stuff here, particularly involving physicality, it's so surprising.
It is.
Hooper ends up helping him and they escape. And then running out of things to do, it's back to the comic book shop where they find and retrieve the unfinished comic panels for the final issue. And basically, of course, we were always going to lead to this. We need an artist, and Ethan needs to do it. Of course, Ethan is filled with self-doubt, but Hooper bigs him up, reminding him that even Frankie believed in him too, so he gets to work. It all seems quiet for a bit as then a cardboard cutout when it comes to life. Know what happened to the last guy who tried to stop me? Let's just say his subscription was cancelled. I love that line. That was so stupid. I laughed.
Yeah, just before we get into like the final showdown bit, I just wanted to say, firstly, I think we've already mentioned it, but yeah, I did want to highlight that. I think that high quality acting that it is going from that, not just the adult actors, but the kids are doing such a great job. These two child actors carrying this episode alongside some clearly more seasoned actors and the Ghastly Grinner actor and all that. So they're doing such a great job. But there was one scene after the scene in the school that, we're being so positive about this episode, but there's just one minor negative I thought their reactions after that scene at the school was a little underwhelming in terms of what they just seen and experienced. Like, I thought that their demeanors and after their multiple encounters with the gunner at that point, everything they've seen, there was a little bit too chill, a little bit too like, I'm not going to say they're going to show like emotion and stuff like that, but like a little bit more terror from what they've seen. They're a little bit, yeah, that was just small criticism there. That's it.
So I think that's valid because I'd also argue that jumping back and forth between locations feels a bit disjointed. But I suspect that the reason I think these next sets of scenes in the comic book store were filmed probably out of order, and that
Mm.
basically, from an acting perspective, it was either the director didn't nail it, Ron Oliver didn't tell them exactly what he needed when they first get there. And so, from their perspective, it's filming those scenes at the comic book and being told, well, listen, this next scene will be you post this event in the school. Unless you're doing an order, you're not really going to understand that, maybe to a certain degree. Um, it's a difficult one to call because I don't know what would have been acceptable. Were they supposed to be terrified? Were they supposed? There's no argument to say they might be running on adrenaline because it's been a non-stop run from one place to another. You know?
Of course, there's many you can make those reasons, and like you said, maybe they filmed this final showdown. That was the first thing they filmed, and then
Yeah.
once they filmed everything at the end, the editors had to put it together. They were like, oh crap, we put it together, and they're not like scared at the right times and that kind of thing. But that's just how it turned out. Yeah, maybe.
The Grinner's here now, though, and in another one of my favorite scenes in the entire thing, he picks up Hooper by her pigtails, which is hilarious. Facing off against her, starts to attempt the transformer. But I love his confusion. His confused face was very, very funny. And Hooper reveals, and it's been a joke throughout, that Hooper doesn't have a sense of humor. So he has no effect on her, which I don't know. I just thought it was brilliant. I realized at this point that Hooper might be a sociopath and maybe the most dangerous person in the episode.
Yeah, I mean, there's a line earlier on where it's mentioned, I think, like that she's obviously like a nerd, and she says basically her line is people should know what they are and work with it. It's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah,
Such a great line.
yeah, she is fantastic. Happily, Ethan has finally finished the comic book and made himself the main superhero character. And again, in another great scene, the Grinner panicking runs at Ethan. Ethan runs at him holding the comic book, and they kind of slam into each other and disappear in a yellow flash with a laugh heard in the background. And Ethan and Ghastly Grinner enter the comic book world for battle. Now, I think people could go one of two ways: disappointment, or for me, more than happy for it to end this way. Because what we basically get is the last part is told by Hooper reading the comic book. We don't really see it. It's told more than anything else. And I thoroughly enjoyed this aspect of it. This way of doing it felt very, very a different way to end it because it's Hooper reading the comic book panels as it tells the story of the Grinner being zapped by a ray from the microwave that now, because it's in the comic book world, actually works. But because it's a comic book as well, there's a twist. And the Ghastly Grinner isn't done yet. About to jump out on Ethan, Hooper uses an eraser to get rid of the Ghastly Grinner's face, and this seems to end things as Ethan is freed and the Grinner is trapped in the comic. Now, you can go, well, oh, that's all really convenient and easy. Have you ever read a comic book in your life? If you remember this, this is a comic book brought to life. Everything works. Everything fucking works. So why not?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was an interesting creative choice to have it take place inside the comic book. I do think probably it was maybe a smart budgetary decision because they'd clearly used a lot of money up to this point for lots of reasons. You know, it would have been fun had to be able to follow him into the comic book and we got to see all the creative things they could have done within it in that world. But yeah, that's not what we got, unfortunately. I mean, like you said, you can look at it from what different perspectives, but I think it works for what they did anyway.
I think you nailed it. It's the budgetary issue, and there's a high chance it may end up looking really cheap had they tried to create an environment,
Mm.
put Ethan in a costume to make him look bigger and like it could have been really really bad.
We've seen some really bad CGI effects of like inner worlds of places. So yeah, maybe it was just best to avoid it.
Agreed. But everyone's back now, and Hooper and Ethan hug as we see Frankie is also back alongside her father, Sylvester, who she introduces to the kids. And yeah, basically, as the story ends, Betty Ann reveals that Ethan went on to become a big comic book artist with fans coming from all over the world to meet him at conventions. So we get a nice happy ending where he became a star. And I like that ending. It's the kind of one that mattered. This is one that didn't need a twist ending or anything like that. Didn't need to hear the laugh of the Grinner because we already knew the Grinner still exists. He was just trapped in the comic book now, never to be released again in theory. But ultimately, at the end of this, all I gotta say is one of the best. It's one of the most satisfying, enjoyable, entertaining watches of the entire show. Not just the season, but the entire show. This is it. This is where you nail everything. You nail everything. You've got a good director, you've got a good story written, you've got the idea, and everybody gets the idea. From the actors to the composer, everyone involved goes, we get it. We want this to be wacky, weird, comic booky. And everybody works their asses off to make sure that's the case. We've got a great cast, all doing their best. It's got comedy, it's got horror. I think this might be one of the most unbeatable. If we're talking our tier lists, this is
Mm.
going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hard one to top, and you basically nailed everything I would like to say about it as well. But yeah, I mean, I often criticize a lot of these episodes for sometimes telling good stories but lacking the horror and wacky elements that's what I want to see. This does everything that I want to see. I mean, the goosebumps, which does it more often, it seems, than Are You Afraid of the Dark. We're getting to know as we go through it, but
Mm.
it just nails that the tone and the actors are all great, visuals are all great. It really pushes the limit of what you can do with the age rating in these shows. Yeah, I think maybe again there could have been something at the end. Maybe again it would have been nice to have a little twist, maybe like ooh, teasing the return of the Ghastly Grinner at the end. Again, like it just never has that thing like Goosebumps has, where it has that little hook at the end. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say anything really negative about it because there really isn't anything to say. I think it is one of the strongest I have read of the Dark episodes by far so far.
Okay, well, I'm going to reveal something now then because I left it out the notes because I didn't want the notes because I thought it went on too long. But there was a interesting set of facts regarding the Ghastly Grinner character. So the way it works in Canada means Ron Oliver owns the rights to that character. Nobody can use that character without his permission, and he has allowed it to be used. He's more than happy to get. But however, apparently there was an attempt to make an Are You Afraid of the Dark movie either in 2019 or 2009, and they wanted to use the character, but they basically didn't offer him enough, so he refused. And that was part of not that wasn't the complete reason, but the movie idea fell apart anyway. However, the actor that plays the Ghastly Grinner has said that he would be happy to reprise the role, and it's been rumored that that could happen. So like it's all there, it's all existed, and apparently it is a character that comes back later on.
I mean, the countless like B movie horror movies that get greenlit every day. I mean, there's a lot of potential here. I think, even with like a smaller budget, obviously, the concept with like real horror, I think it could be great. Yeah.
Don't put anything past anything. We've had two Goosebump movies. And I know Goosebumps is arguably more popular and stuff like that. Don't ever count anything out in this regard. They've already tried it once, it didn't work. There's no reason why someone doesn't get an idea, particularly in the lower budget end of things. And the Ghastly Grinner would be a great choice to be included in that, I suspect. Yeah, yeah, it's that. It's just a great one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think? You agree with us? Is this up there for you? Or you got more negatives that maybe you want to point out to us? You know what to do. Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It does help us out. You can find us at gbhbl.com and across all social media platforms. And if you really want to give us a bit of extra support, please consider buying us a cup of coffee over on our coffee page. Thank you.